Live-action adaptations and reboots are a thorn in the side for many enjoyers of books and comics alike. This is especially true nowadays when everything coming out of Hollywood is a film adaptation of another film adaptation, of a book, of a poem, of blah blah blah. The list goes on. All this to say, originality has kicked the bucket. And while this may seem like a recent issue in the West, the adaptation market has always been around, more evidently in Japanese entertainment. If a manga or a game is popular enough, chances are it will receive an anime adaptation, as this introduces the franchise to a wider audience. This is how many famous and infamous animes come to be. But some franchises get popular enough to the point that anime audiences aren't enough. They need normies to join in the fun. And that's how we get into the bizarre rabbit hole of anime to live-action pipeline. This can go one of three ways. Absolutely awful, not so awful, and surprisingly, kinda good. There's also the so bad it's good category, but that depends on the audience having a special sense of humor. Of course, most of these adaptations fall under the absolutely awful category. Just looking at the posters and reviews is enough to let you know the kind of brain rot each show entails. The truth is that many of these shows try to stick too closely to the animated format, some going as far as to using ill-fitting cosplay and props and ultimately failing to actually adapt to a live-action form. Art has to shape to the medium, not the other way around. Otherwise you get hilariously bad adaptations like this. Why do I bring this up? Because the case we're dealing with today is a show that actually attempted to adapt. Introducing Future Diary Another World, a live-action based on, you guessed it, Future Diary. The show premiered on Fuji TV on April 21st, 2012, which was only a week after the anime finished its initial run on TV. This adaptation consisted of 11 episodes and finished its original run on June 30th of the same year. It was then released on DVD and Blu-ray, both with a standard and limited edition set. The limited edition set included a fancy display box and 50-page booklet with information about the characters, cast, and an interview with Sakai Asuno. More on this later. If you're curious where you can find the show online, it's on the Internet Archive with English and Spanish subtitles. There are also other means you can use to download it, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that here, so you're on your own for that one. Anyway, onto the review itself. The plot summary on my drama list reads as follows. Hoshino Arata is a lazy college student who doesn't believe in spending effort or working toward the future. One day he gets a diary, the future diary, on his mobile phone, and he becomes involved in a game of survival. While the show's plot is inspired by Future Diary, it has many interesting changes that help it adapt better to its shorter and live-action form. Ahead we have an overview and analysis for each episode that will dive into these changes. Of course, it contains spoilers, so keep that in mind in case you want to watch the show on your own. Context for the video. So before getting into the rundown of the show, I want to talk a little bit about the lead up to making this video. If you want to skip this part, feel free to do so with the chapters down below, because this is a bit of a ramble on my part, but I feel like it's worth talking about. My internet presence so far has been dedicated to translations for Future Diary and archiving its media, as I'm a pretty big fan of the anime and manga, you could say that. But the most I've ever done has been writing essays on Tumblr and some video translations here and there. Also translating the PSP game, which was a lot. However, documenting my research on videos has never been my approach. It's very personal and takes a lot more work than just writing up something. That said, when I was researching this topic to talk about it on my Tumblr, I realized just how much there was to say about this show. Something that I thought would be a quick write-up soon turned into pages upon pages of rants and descriptions and rundowns of every little detail. Because there's such a magic to this show that I feel like making a quick summary wouldn't be doing it justice. In fact, I felt this very similar way about my previous posts, particularly relating to translations on the PSP game and a more personal essay that I wrote about my feelings on why I like Future Diary so much. I never took the plunge into making videos discussing these topics out of fear of, making a bad video, as silly as it sounds, but today I'm taking the chance to do what I feel is best, and so I hope you'll enjoy. Anyway, enough yapping, let's get to the rundown of the show. Characters and cast. Let's first introduce the cast and get a feel for the characters. To accommodate the show's shorter run, the diary owners were reduced from 12 to 7. Their names, ages, and personalities were also changed, so much so that we don't have a one-to-one representation for any character in this live action. Rather, we are talking about people inspired by certain diary owners. Moreover, each diary owner is also inspired by an Olympian spirit, instead of a god from the Deconcentus, as is the case in the anime. To clarify, Olympian spirits are entities that appear in certain ritual or ceremonial magic books and rule over a set of provinces in which the universe is divided into, according to Wikipedia. With this in mind, let's take a look at our characters. Arata Hoshino, a 21-year-old college student and protagonist, based on Yukiteru and portrayed by Masaki Okada. He's inspired by Aratron, the ruler of most provinces and spirit of Saturn. Yuno Furusaki, a 19-year-old college student and protagonist, based on Yuno, of course, and portrayed by Ayame Goriki. She's inspired by Full, the spirit of the moon. Kinjiro Hagito, a 33-year-old Sakurami police detective, based on both Kurusu and Ishijima, and portrayed by Yoshinori Okada. He's inspired by Hagith, spirit of Venus. Megumi Fuwa, a 17-year-old high school student, portrayed by Fumi Nikaido. It's unclear whether she was inspired by a pre-existing diary owner, as she has no connection to other characters. She's inspired by Phallag, spirit of Mars. Yosuke Okuda, a 24-year-old serial killer based on Takao Hiyama and portrayed by Yuta Hiraoka. He's inspired by Ok, spirit of the sun. Toru Kibe, the 52-year-old president of Chronoseed Corp, based on John Bacchus and portrayed by Shiro Sano. He's inspired by Bether, spirit of Jupiter. Haruna Okie, 19-year-old college student and Ryui's younger sister, loosely based on Tsuwaki and portrayed by Mayuko Fukuda. She's inspired by Ophio, spirit of Mercury. Ryui Moriguchi, Arata's friend and older brother of Haruna, based on Akise and portrayed by Kanata Hongo. His name is inspired by the word grimoire, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is the name of a magic book about summoning demon spirits and the like. Kuro Hoshino, Arata's 48-year-old father and worker at Chronoseed Corp, based on Kuro Amano, but less deadbeat, and portrayed by Ken Mitsuishi. Kosaka Oji, a 19-year-old college student and Arata's best friend, based on Kosaka, of course, and portrayed by Fumaki Kuchi. Rinko Uehara, a 27-year-old woman and love interest of Hagito, portrayed by Yuri Nakamura. Some sources claim she's based on Minene since she has a relationship with a detective. However, she shares no similarities with Minene aside from this. Reiko Hoshino, Arata's 50-year-old mother, based on Rea and portrayed by Yoshiko Miyazaki. And last but definitely not least, we have Deus, portrayed by Yuki Uchida. Episode overview and analysis. Arata is a regular college student who has no prospects for his future, living one day at a time. One day, after Kosaka clumsily steps over Arata's old phone, his friend Rui gives him a limited edition Chronoseed phone. Shortly after, Arata figures out that the phone has the ability to predict the future, and takes advantage of this the way that any smart guy in college would, by gambling and clubbing. As he's using the diary's power to cheat on his exams, he's discovered by Yuno, a fellow classmate of his. She promises not to tell on him, eventually revealing that she is too a diary owner. However, her use of the diary is particular, to say the least, as she has been stalking Arata and following him everywhere with its predictions. The girl is completely and utterly infatuated with him. Creeped out by this, Arata avoids her like the plague and keeps living it up. That is, until reality hits, when Arata gets a dead-end prediction on his phone. He's then forced to team up with Yuno to take down his attacker and confront his friend Rui, the one responsible for handing out the future diaries to every player. As it turns out, Rui's sister, Haruna, was kidnapped, and in exchange for her safety, Rui was blackmailed into handing out the Chronoseed phones. The entity behind this ruse is none other than Deus, a mysterious technological being that introduces a survival game to our leads. This game soon claims its first victim as Arata's father successfully fends off his attacker, at the expense of his own life. A confused and frustrated Arata swears to put an end to the game, teaming up with Rui, Yuno, and Haruna to locate the other diary owners and figure out who is behind all this, so no more blood will be shed. As the show progresses, our leads try to find the rest of the diary owners while still being chased by the initial attacker. This attacker is a serial killer nicknamed Southpaw, as the only information the police have on him is that he's left-handed. Shout out to my fellow lefties! He targets anyone with a limited edition Chronoseed phone, and his targets are soon set on Arata and Yuno after their initial encounter. In episode 2, we meet perhaps the most forgettable of the diary owners, Megumi. Sorry girl. We know little of her aside from her connection to Rui, her being one of the high school students he tutors. We also learn more about Detective Hagito, another of the diary owners and cousin of Rui. Using his resources as a detective, he joins forces with Rui and Arata to discover more about the game. The climax of this episode reaches its peak after Megumi, Yuno, and Arata are trapped by the serial killer in a warehouse, leaving Rui and Hagito to try to save them. Unfortunately, Megumi's deep-seated trust issues make her incredibly paranoid of Arata and Yuno, believing they're the ones trying to kill her. Arata is then forced to end her short-lived appearance on the show as an act of self-defense, since Megumi was threatening to kill both him and Yuno. Our leads are later rescued by Rui and Hagito, scaring away the killer. Fast forward to the next episode, the serial killer is preparing to ambush Yuno and Arata in Yuno's home. Arata is made aware of this through his diary entries, which also inform him that he will kill the assailant. Still shaken up by Megumi's death, this leaves him with a strong moral dilemma: to kill and become the bad guy, or not to kill. In the meantime, Hagito and Rui uncover a message that Arata's father left him before passing away, where he reveals to have a deeper involvement with the creation of the Chronoseed phones. However, he was unaware of how they came to predict the future. Hagito also manages to uncover the serial killer's identity and his home address. Upon investigating his house, they discover that the killer, whose name is actually Yosuke, had an overbearing and strict mother. Later in his life, his mother falls into a coma and he's forced to take care of her until she passes away in her bed. Yosuke left the corpse there for 3 years until it was discovered during Hagito's investigation. By this point, Yosuke has already infiltrated Yuno's home, where the struggle ensues. During their heated fight, Yosuke reveals the reason he became a killer. After his mother passed away, he was left without a reason to live. That's when Deus, or at least someone associated with Deus, contacts him with the promise of creating a better future with him, in exchange for participating in the game. Arata helps him understand that he was being manipulated, and that this person doesn't actually want to create a future with him. Yosuke was merely a pawn used to set the game in motion. Crushed by the truth, Yosuke destroys his own diary and disappears, but not before leaving us with an interesting fact. Did you know that people in comas dream? Put a pin on this for later. Now on to episode 4. Before talking about the synopsis itself, I just want to mention a scene that kinda lives rent-free in my head. There's a moment at the beginning of this episode where Hagito walks up to Arata and, being the paranoid girly she is, threatens him with a fork. Yes, a fork. Never was it a bad idea to threaten a police officer with an innocuous kitchen utensil, no less. Anyway, Arata quickly stops her and nothing comes from this, so you can forget about it now. As for the main conflict of this episode, Arata, Yuno, Rui, Haruna, and Hagito are being stalked by the CEO of Chronoseed Corp, whose name is Kibe. He also kidnaps Hagito's love interest, Rinko, as blackmail. We learn a little more about Rinko through flashbacks. Her and Hagito met after she went to the police station over a domestic violence dispute. She eventually drops the charges and gets back with her boyfriend, but keeps meeting up with Hagito from time to time, as they establish a connection. She later reveals her plans to marry her boyfriend despite their rocky relationship. However, the situation ends badly after a violent argument forces Rinko to push her abuser over the balcony railing, killing him and leaving her badly traumatized. By the time Hagito gets to the scene, Rinko's wounds and trauma leave her in a state of amnesia. She is then hospitalized and often visited by Hagito, who's helping her regain her memories of him. Back to the present, the group is planning to ambush Kibe at the Chronoseed building, since they believe him to be Deus. Hagito goes on his own to interrogate Kibe, while the rest of the group infiltrate the building, preparing to ambush at Hagito's call. However, unbeknownst to them, Kibe threatens to hurt Rinko if Hagito doesn't kill the group, and Hagito does as he's told, shooting all 4 of them. Psych! a total unexpected turn of events, Hagito shoots the group with fake bullets. Fake look bullets, if you will. Which is enough to make them fall unconscious and pretend they're murders. What a twist! However, Kiba sees right through this stunt and shoots Hagito instead. It is then that Kiba reveals to Hagito that he is not Deus, but another diary owner. In fact, he despises Deus, as his creature believes to be above Kiba himself, and Kiba is a very egotistical guy. Because of this, Kiba swore to kill the rest of the diary owners, so he can finally meet Deus and destroy it with his own hands. Hagito is allowed to talk to Rinko one last time before dying, which is when Rui finds him and realizes Kiba's plans. Rui goes to alert the rest of the group, who are soon chased by Kiba's goons. Mulling over his survival skills, Rui wants to rescue Rinko, as a way to avenge Hagito. In the meantime, Arata, Yuno, and Haruna decide to hide away somewhere safe, though Arata is still set on going after Kiba. This is when Yuno lets it slip that there is no point in meeting Kiba since he's not actually Deus. Something the group didn't know yet. Uh-oh, Yuno, your true colors are showing just a little bit. There's no time to worry about this though, since Kiba's goons are back on her trail. A long chase scene later, Arata and Haruna leave the building, surely followed by Rui, who rescued Rinko. They all reunite outside, and Rinko decides to go to the police over the death of her ex. Hagito had originally sued the police to rule it an accident, despite Rinko throwing her abuser off the ledge. However, feeling guilty over everything Hagito has done to protect her, she wants to confess her part in her ex's death, so she can finally be at peace with herself. Once she leaves, Arata makes a sharp observation. Where's Yuno? Seriously, no one's concerned about this girl's well-being. Despite Haruna's pleas, Arata returns to the building in search of Yuno. Curiously enough, Yuno's doing just fine in Kiba's office. So fine, in fact, Yuno's mere presence makes Kiba fall to his knees, battered and defeated, as he takes his own life by shooting his diary. Having witnessed all this, Arata makes another sharp observation. What the hell happened? To which Yuno responds by promptly ignoring him. How sweet. Once this matter is resolved, Haruna reveals a secret she's been keeping from the group. She too owns a Chronoseed phone, which was given to her by her kidnapper. She initially didn't believe it to be a future diary, as everything written on it was a lie. But during their earlier chase, the entries that appeared on the diary started to become true. Right. This means that she's the 7th and last diary owner. This is something that was hinted at earlier during Yuno's confrontation with Kiba, where it was revealed that Arata's father wasn't a participant in the survival game. He was initially believed to be one due to owning a Chronoseed phone, but Kiba created copies of the future diaries to give to his employees. In other words, the real participants are Arata, Yuno, Hagito, Megumi, Yosuke, Kiba, and Haruna. Not everyone who owns a Chronoseed phone is a participant of the game. Just clearing this up because it took me a couple of rewatches to understand this point. Moving forward, Arata spends the night at Yuno's house. No, not like that. As he's been meaning to ask her a couple of questions about her suspicious behavior. You see, I haven't spoken much about Yuno, but she's been hiding some things from us. Aside from her knowledge of Kiba and deeper knowledge of the game overall, there is a room in her basement that she never allows anyone in, not even Arata. The room has an awful banging noise coming from within, which Yuno claims to be nothing more than a little kitty she rescued. How noble of her. Arata's asking too many questions though, so our noble Yuno has to put an end to his blabbering by spiking his drink and chaining the man to her bed. Yikes. After waking up, both Arata and Yuno are greeted by a message from Deus. Only 3 days remain of the survival game, and the last 3 contestants have dead-end flags set for that date. As it turns out, Arata's dead end claims that Yuno will be the one to kill him, though Yuno assures him that she has no intention of taking his life. In an attempt to calm her down, Arata goes in for a hug, but is too chained up to do so. Yuno, the benevolent soul that she is, releases him and falls right into his arms, all the while Arata is setting her down on the bed and chaining her up for a change. At last, the kidnapper has become the kidnapped E. Arata leaves Yuno's house, making sure to block her room and impede her escape. On the other end of things, Rui is concerned that Arata isn't answering his calls, so he goes to check on Yuno's house. As he opens the basement door, he receives a call from Arata, which prompts Dewey to leave the place, conveniently leaving said door open. Dewey, Haruna, and Arata meet at a bridge, where they assess the situation. Dewey suggests looking deeper into those, but time is running out, so Haruna goes in for the kill and attempts to attack Arata with a stun gun. Dewey steps in, preventing her attack, but in return, trips over the railing and falls to his death. Which I'd believe if the shit wasn't 4 feet tall. Look, I understand that for safety reasons they probably couldn't act out this scene in a bridge with lower railings, but they couldn't even be bothered to make it slightly believable. I'll later talk more about the acting and fight scenes, because they're definitely not as good as they could be, but this scene is the most egregious example of that. Anyway, Onichan's dead. Womp womp. Arata goes back to Yuno's house, just to find her missing. Set on talking to her, he follows his diary entries all the way to an abandoned building. Turns out Haruna is already waiting for him inside, and to everyone's surprise, she reveals to be not so innocent. The person who locked Arata and Megumi in that warehouse, not the serial killer, but Haruna. The thing about her not believing she had a future diary? Total bullshit. Curly knew all along that she was a diary owner and was dead set on winning the game. Now she intends to fight Arata more than ever to bring her brother back. Though much to her dismay, Arata's a pacifist and won't entertain a fight. So instead, they settle for sitting inside the building's dilapidated remains and wait for the roof to cave in on one of them. Very smart. As the roof begins to crumble little by little, Arata has a heart-to-heart with Haruna, reminding her she's not as cold as she believes herself to be. He reaches for her humanity, reminiscing on times she's saved both him and Dewey. She's deeply touched by Arata's kindness, prompting a reaction when the roof finally caves in on him. She launches forward and takes his place, saving him at the expense of her own life. Before disappearing, Arata promises Haruna to destroy Yuno's diary, which he stole after being freed from her bed, by the way, and bring everything back to normal once he wins the game. But as soon as he's about to fulfill his promise, Yuno shows up. Arata stops on his tracks, confused by her suddenly calling him Arata-san instead of her usual Akkun. In this short window of time, Yuno pounces on Arata, thrusting a knife into his heart and promptly breaking his diary. That's right, Arata dies. And no, this is not the end of the show. I conveniently forgot to tell you this is only episode 6. Oops. Let's take a little break from the action and talk about the show so far, shall we? I first watched this show 7 years ago, back when my future diary obsession was at its peak. Yes, it used to be worse than this. And despite that, the show never quite clicked for me. I've never been a huge fan of soap operas. The terrible acting and over-the-top theatrics were always a huge turn-off for me. And this show falls victim to that quite often, might I add. The acting and dialogue can be a little bit unbelievable at times, not the worst but certainly not the greatest. The fight scenes are where you lose me completely though. Much like Dewey falling from his 4 feet railing, most of the struggles you witness are pretty laughable, having light kicks and punches completely knock out a character. Heck, in episode 1 they fend off the attacker by throwing empty boxes at him. Cheap stunts, the horror. I realized the budget wasn't high enough to make stunts more believable, but they still couldn't be bothered to hide it or at least make it more entertaining to watch. By episode 6 I was a bit bored and turned off from the show. Until the ending, that is. I was not expecting Arata to die all of a sudden. After all, this is a future diary adaptation. It's going to follow the plot, right? My interest was piqued even further when Arata wakes up in a carpeted room, a TV front and center, surrounded by all the diary owners who have died before. Alive and well, by the way. Just what the hell is going on? Is this what they call a plot twist? And my friends, what a twist indeed. Inside the room, the owners are surprised to see Arata be the last loser, all except for Haruna, whose cynicism led her to distrust Yuno from the beginning. And speaking of a devil, Yuno is nowhere to be found, as only 6 of the 7 chairs in the room are occupied. It seems like this is the loser corner, with nothing to do and nowhere to run. There is a door, but of course it's locked from the outside, so it's more of a prop than anything. It's certainly awkward being inside a room of people you killed, so to break the ice, Arata tries brainstorming ideas of what this place could be. Maybe this is heaven, hell, Heck, maybe a black hole swallowed us all. We're talking interstellar shit. But no one's playing along. Such a difficult crowd. The only one entertaining Arata's ideas is Hagito, though he's just as clueless as us. So being the cool detective guy he is, he tries lighting up a cigarette to ease his mind. This is the thing that finally prompts a reaction from the crew. They really don't like the smoke, especially Megumi, who completely flies off the handle at the sight of it. Moving past that whole scene, Arata tries talking to Kibe, who's been giving everyone the cold shoulder since the minute he showed up. Rude. But Arata doesn't care. He needs to know what happened with Yuno at his office. Instead of giving a clear answer, Kiba starts talking about the room itself. Something about going to the city hall, answering a call, walking into a room. This room. They met there. All of them. And then, the smoke. And Yuno knows. Yuno knew all of it. It seems like Kiba is getting to the truth, but that's too close for comfort. Before he can finish telling us this tale, he suddenly vanishes, much to everyone's shock. This soon becomes a pattern of the owners remembering things they aren't supposed to. Yosuke, Megumi, Hagito, and Hanna, they all regain little tidbits of their memories, but vanish before they can put the pieces together. Perhaps more chillingly is the message Hanna leaves before disappearing. Looking around, she takes in the room. It was once filled with smoke, and they were all trapped inside. Everyone tried calling for their loved ones, but no one answered. No one picked up. Not even her own brother answered her calls. Brother? Her brother? What brother? Arata, don't you remember? This room. This is where we died. Alone and panicked, Arata tries calling for someone, anyone. Suddenly, the TV in the middle of the room turns on, and on it is his dad? And this isn't some measly recording either. It's a call from his dad. Arata can communicate with his father through the TV, but his father is also being cryptic as hell. Arata panics, but his father urges him to stay calm. Otherwise, Deus could find them. This is the point where all the pieces start coming together, as Arata's father begins to explain the magnitude of the situation. Arata and the diary owners alike are trapped in a virtual world called Olympia. This is a virtual reality created for coma patients, a place where their minds can be transferred to and allow them to carry on with their lives while unconscious. All this is possible thanks to an artificial intelligence that tricks the mind of said patients into building fake memories. This artificial intelligence is called, you guessed it, Deus Ex Machina. But what seemed like a cool little project to help comatose patients soon turned into a nightmare for those in the real world. The virtual reality wasn't enough for Deus. It couldn't be contained, so it leaked out of its program and invaded the city's power lines. Electricity, transport, gas, and water services began shutting down as it took reign over the city. But this is all too much information for Arata. He eventually remembers everything that happened in that room. In case you couldn't tell, Arata and the diary owners were caught up in a fire in the real world. The smoke filled the room and left them in a comatose state. Arata's father, a doctor and researcher in this field, created Olympia to help them out, though it backfired. He now wants to recruit Arata's help to destroy Deus, as he's the only one who can access it from within Olympia. Arata needs to insert a code into Deus, who roams the virtual reality in human form in order to stop it. His father also warns him not to trust Rui, as he's a figment of this virtual reality, and could very well be Deus' human form. There isn't much time to mull over this information since Arata is promptly sent back to Olympia, where the survival game starts over just as it did before. And that is the end of episode 7, my favorite episode of this show. No matter how many times I rewatch it, I'm always enthralled by the acting, the foreshadowing, and subtle storytelling. This is the best episode in terms of all three, and it completely changed my view towards the series. You see, Future Diary has a complicated twist at the end regarding multidimensional time skips, and reenacting those scenes in the real life is not an easy task. So instead of falling short in its premise, the series gave it a brand new coat of paint, something different to adapt to its medium. And what I love is that such a retelling, as drastic of a change as it brings, keeps all the core aspects of what makes Future Diary's story unique. The selfish god, the game restarting itself, Arata slowly regaining his memories, you know, knowing everything from the start, and kinda getting ahead of myself here, but Yuno having an evil counterpart. Heck, don't even get me started on the virtual reality being called Olympia, or the phones being called Chronos in reference of the god of time. The essence of Future Diary is there, even if the characters and story are different. Not to mention, this isn't just your average "it was all a dream" situation. This is a story of an artificial intelligence created to help people suddenly turning on them. A well-known trope turned over its head to fit the Future Diary plot. Kind of freaky considering the current timeline we're living in, besides the show being over a decade old. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let's get back on track. By episode 8, Arata is already meddling in everyone's business, contacting Rui about Harana's kidnapping, telling Hagito the identity of the serial killer, saying he's everyone's friend to gain their trust, essentially trying to impede the survival game from progressing as Deus intended. Mind you, Deus is well aware of what's going on, but Arata is dead set on interfering. One of the ways he does so is by reconciling with his father over him leaving the family. This plot point is a little more complicated, so I'll explain it at the end, but I just have to mention this scene. It's my favorite from the show. It's very emotional and well played, and it makes me tear up every time. Even if you're watching this recap instead of watching the show, I still recommend you go watch this scene and experience it on your own. Moving on, we have trouble ahead. Haito tells Arata about his interrogation of the serial killer. We find out that the person who gave him the phone, aka Deus, is actually a woman. Rui mentions that Haruna's kidnapper, also presumed to be Deus, was a woman too. And who's an awfully suspicious woman who knows a little too much about the survival game? Well, you know, of course. But let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Arata talks to Kibe, who tells us more about this woman. She contacted Kibe to have the Future Diary app installed on the phones, and goes by the pseudonym Jinguji. Kibe goes to look for his diary, only to find out that it's missing. The only thing he finds as he searches for it is a pink, bouncy ball. The same bouncy ball that Yuno always carries with her. Sorry girl, things are not looking good for you. Due to his rising suspicions, Arata goes to Yuno's house. The girl greets him at the door with a friendly "Akkun," though Arata isn't having any of that right now. He opens the floodgates to all the questions we have. Who are you? Are you Deus? Why do you kill me? But their little Q&A is suddenly interrupted by the banging of the door. The basement door, to be exact. Arata, already full of Yuno's lies, goes for the door to see what else she's been hiding from him. And wouldn't you guessed it, it's another damn Yuno. Double trouble. I must add she's alive and kicking because her anime counterpart sure wasn't. Now, if episode 7 was my favorite, 9 is my second favorite. And that's because here we get Yuno's backstory, as told by Yuno herself, who's trying to appease a very confused Arata and a very confused audience. To understand, we must jump back to the past and into the real world for a second. Yuno and Arata go way back, a year ago to be precise. After Yuno's parents passed away in an accident, she was left feeling empty and lost in terms of her future. She would roam the planetarium and search for meaning in the stars, one of her passions. And that's where she met Arata. They soon started dating, of which we get to see many of their little dates on screen. These dates show us two important details. The ball that Yuno always carries around with her. It was a gift from Arata, and it's not just any gift, it's the first present she's ever received. Much like her anime counterpart, Yuno Furusaki had quietly overbearing parents, who expected her to excel in her studies and become a doctor, and virtually no support system outside of that. It's implied that being a doctor wasn't something she wanted, rather it was pushed on her, and now that there were no parents left to impress, she has no direction in life, or had, since Arata gave her a new purpose. But one of their dates at the planetarium ended catastrophically when they were caught in a fire, the same fire that led them to a coma. However, Yuno managed to make a speedy recovery and woke up from Olympia, unlike her peers. However, she was devastated after finding out that Arata was still in a coma. Desperate to see him again, she begged her doctors to connect her once more. Despite the chance that she might never wake up from Olympia, the doctors decide to put her back in. That is because Arata's father, the lead researcher and doctor, wants her to put an end to Deus. Given she's recovered, he can freely talk to her about the situation with Deus, and give her instructions on the deactivation process. There's only a couple of setbacks she has to account for. Arata mustn't find out about anything, as he's forgotten about Yuno and Olympia, and remembering could hurt his psyche. and Yuno's account is still active in Olympia, despite her being disconnected. In other words, there is a copy of Yuno still roaming in Olympia, and in order to carry out the plan smoothly, Yuno must restrain and replace her. Which he did by locking her in the basement. Such a familiar tale, isn't it? It would have all worked out if that pesky Dewey hadn't opened the door to the basement. This set our fake Yuno out into the wild, killing the real Yuno and Arata in the process, which is where the first round of the game ended. Unlike Arata, Yuno actually woke up after dying in Olympia. Due to her failure, Arata's father passed the mission on to him, but Yuno still couldn't bear to be without him, so she pleaded to be reconnected, much to the dismay of her doctors. Reluctantly, they connect her back into the second round of the game. She again locks fake Yuno in the basement, but like clockwork, she's set free by our enraged Arata, which takes us back to the present. A now enlightened Arata embraces Yuno, regretting that he forgot all about her. He apologizes for everything, not treating her better, not trusting her, having her risk her life for him, but Yuno doesn't seem to mind. She's just happy to finally have her Arata back. That happiness is short-lived though, as Yuno suddenly faints. Her vitals in the real world are failing, and the consequences of reconnecting are starting to kick in. Such a sweet episode, why did it have to end like this? They want to make us suffer, I swear. On to episode 10, the second to last one. The doctors manage to stabilize Yuno's body, and she wakes up, still in Olympia. Her state is frail though manageable, so Arata calls Kosaka to look after her. In the meantime, Arata is called to Kiba's office, where the police find footage and records of the woman who created the future diaries, also known as Deus. The police confirm her name to be Dei Jinguji, though further records of her have mysteriously disappeared. All that's left is the footage of her leaving the bouncy ball in Kiba's office. Side note, it's a bit hard to discern the meaning of Deus' pseudonym, since we never see the kanji for it. However, after analyzing all the possible etymology, Jinguji probably alludes to a site of god worship, while Dei could mean anything from beautiful and graceful to gratitude and reliance. So her name probably means something along the lines of sacrifice for God or reliance on God's worship. Even though Arata is seemingly getting closer to Deus' true identity, she is already 2 steps ahead. Behind the scenes, Deus begins to manipulate both fake Yuno and Dewey through various means to antagonize our main duo. Arata is none the wiser, so he keeps following Deus' tracks. Eventually, Deus decides to appear before Arata in her human form, a woman wearing a long black dress and stiletto heels. She's an open book to Arata's inquiries and lets him into every one of her motivations. Deus explains that Olympia is incredibly unstable. The doctors made a bad call when they executed the program, since they never completed the project before plugging people in. To avoid Olympia's collapse, Deus is looking for the final piece that will complete Olympia, a human mind of strong will. The survival game was her plan to reach this goal, and Arata seemed to be the right fit. However, her plans were foiled when the fake Yuno killed Arata, forcing Deus to restart the game. This in turn caused Olympia to break even further, bringing it closer to its eventual collapse. Arata makes it clear that he doesn't care about Olympia collapsing. He's determined to rid the world of Deus' influence. However, Deus' sob story is just a preamble to the real message he wanted to share with Arata, a message of deceit. You see, Arata's father left out a teeny tiny detail when he was giving him the deactivation code. Eliminating Deus and deactivating Olympia might save the world, but in turn, it will eliminate anyone connected to it. In other words, Arata, Yuno, and the rest of the diary owners will remain in a coma, likely to never wake up again, if Olympia is destroyed. So Deus gives Arata an ultimatum: save the world and stay in a coma, or restore Olympia by becoming the last piece. As a side note, I must add that the visuals for this scene are taken directly from The Matrix, with each choice being represented by a red and blue balloon. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of this. It's a pivotal moment of the show that they decided to portray in the most unoriginal way possible. However, it doesn't last long, as Arata picks saving the world with no hesitation. He believes this is another of Deus' manipulation tactics, as his father would never lie to him. Oh, my sweet summer child. Unamused by his decision, Deus vanishes, but not before wishing Arata and Yuno the same fate: elimination. Alarmed by these words, Arata quickly calls up Yuno, who's in a bit of a pickle herself. As it turns out, Deus set fake Yuno out on a mission to kill the real Yuno, by manipulating her into despising her counterpart for essentially stealing her life. The fake Yuno wastes no time and goes to her house, attempting to knock her out with a bat. The real Yuno desperately apologizes and tries to reason with her. This is the version of her before meeting Arata, a girl who is lost, afraid, and alone. She understands her feelings, her fears, her trauma of being locked in a closet, and concedes that shoving her behind that basement door wasn't necessarily cruel. But before Yuno can reach her humanity, Arata shows up at Yuno's house. Instead of coming to an understanding with herself, the fake Yuno quickly shoves the bat at Yuno and pretends to be hurt, so Arata will believe her to be the real Yuno. The nerve of this girl, I swear. Such a stunt has no effect on Arata though. He knows who his Yuno is. That said, he still believes both girls to be Yuno in one way or another, so he swears to protect them both regardless. His words finally reach fake Yuno, who, instead of jealousy, feels at ease that a version of herself finally managed to find someone else. This seems like a wholesome way to end the episode, right? Well, don't hold your breath, because Deus doesn't think the same. Now that fake Yuno is no longer of use, Deus deletes her from the program. As she's vanishing, fake Yuno gives one last message to her duo, a warning. Don't enter the code. Losing Olympia means losing your life. Coming from her, Arata starts to believe this is actually true. Maybe his dad did lie to him. Yuno begs him to stay in Olympia with her, though she can't argue for long. Her vitals fail and she faints once more. Arata suffers a similar fate after being paralyzed with a stun gun, and who did this, you ask? None other than Dewey, who, let's not forget, is also being manipulated by Deus. After all this commotion, we reach episode 11. Last but certainly not least. Arata wakes up inside a church, which we learn is actually Deus' home. Behind him stands Ryui, scowling at his friend. Arata starts asking many questions. Where are we? Where's Yuno? But Ryui only has one thing to say. Arata, what are you hiding from me? Naturally, Arata is reluctant to answer such a difficult question, so Deus takes the burden off his shoulder by suddenly appearing in the room and informing Ryui that he is a program, a string of code tasked with furthering the game. And now that the game is over, Deus assigns him a new task: kill Arata and save their world. This does not bode well for our lead, who desperately reaches out to Ryui in search for his humanity. To Arata, he is not a program but a dear friend. Such words get through to Ryui, quitting his attempts to kill Arata, much to Deus' dismay. Starting to lose her patience, she takes matters into her own hands by erasing Ryui, similarly to what she did to fake Yuno. Of course, Arata is crushed by losing his friend for a second time, and Deus sees his vulnerability as a new opening for her tricks. She tells Arata that he could bring Ryui back by becoming Olympia's last piece. In fact, he could make anything he wants into a reality. But Arata remains silent. Taking this as a sign of his indecision, Deus sets out to look for another last piece. At this moment, a TV inside the room turns on, showcasing the remaining diary owners. They're trapped in a chamber, chained to the chairs behind them, and each given a gun. Besides the gun, each has a future diary with a dead end and a timer on it, suggesting that if they don't kill each other until one person remains, they're all going to die. All the owners are quick to pick up their guns and point them around, except Yuno. Much like Arata, she's determined to put a stop to the game, so she reasons with the owners instead of entertaining their violence. She reminds Haito of Rinko, Yosuke of his mom, Kiba of his resilience. She tells Megumi that she trusts her and Haruna that she wishes she could become friends with her. She argues that they all strive to live in peace, and that they must find a way to defy Deus instead of playing into her tricks. So they wait for the timers to run out, and, much to everyone's surprise, nothing happens. They all survive. Arata is very proud of seeing his girl achieve such a feat. But the same cannot be said for Deus, who figures out she'll have to restart the game once more. Shaken up by this comment, Arata asks Deus if he can truly make anything happen by becoming the last piece. To which Deus says yes. As if a light went on in Arata's head, he agrees to join Olympia at last. Naturally, Deus is pretty ecstatic about this and gives Arata a new future diary. Besides its change in appearance, being red instead of blue, this diary also has the perk of turning everything that's written in it into a reality, so Arata starts typing away. Deus' happiness lasts all of 2 nanoseconds when she sees what Arata wrote down. The 7 diary owners wake up in the real world, and those will stop the cyber attacks. For an artificial intelligence, I'm surprised you didn't see that one coming. As per Adapta's orders, the cyber attacks come to a halt and the diary owners log out of Olympia. All except Yuno and Adapta. Incoming extra alert! Seeing this, Adapta becomes panicked and confused, to which Deus explains that their bodies are too weak for them to log out of Olympia just yet. After all, Olympia is a medical assistance program, and can't allow anything that goes against the well-being of its users. However, Adapta's father is monitoring the situation closely, and has come up with a solution for Adapta. So he contacts him through the TV in the room. Now that Deus isn't interfering with their systems, Adapta's father can finally access Olympia and create an exit for him and Yuno. All that's required to exit is the key, a future diary. So, no big deal, right? As we saw earlier, Adapta has his new and improved courtesy phone, but Yuno, on the other hand, let's say she's a bit empty-handed at the moment. You see, having all the diary owners log out put an end to the survival game, which made every future diary disappear. Adapta still has his red chronoseed phone, as it's not a part of the game, but the same can be said for Yuno. Adapta knows this, yet doesn't say anything to his dad, or to Yuno for that matter. In fact, he asks his father to tell Yuno that he has a diary for her and to wait for him at the exit. Adapta's father agrees and pleads, "Promise me you'll return home." To which Adapta just says, "Thank you." The exit will only be open for 10 minutes, so Adapta must hurry to the location. Despite this, Deus wants to stay in chat for a little longer. She insists that she really likes Adapta, and that she wants to protect him. She wishes they could all live peacefully in Olympia, because Olympia is a beautiful world where everyone's always happy and no one gets hurt. Sick of her excuses, Adapta tells her that there's no such thing as a world where people don't get hurt, that hurt is a part of living. A world without pain is a waste. Because to know happiness, one must also know hurt. This seems to be what finally breaks Deus, as she realizes she can't make Adapta happy. Her purpose as a program has failed, and she's nothing more than a nuisance now. Upon this realization, she gives Adapta a hug, which transfers the deactivation code to her body. So much for keeping Adapta safe, huh? If you couldn't tell, I have some issues with Deus's supposed benevolent nature, but I'll get into that after closing this section. For now, let's just get back to our leads. Adapta and Yuno make it to the exit, where Adapta quickly gives her his phone. Yuno asks where the other diary is, but Adapta just stays silent. Uh-oh. Quickly realizing what's up, Yuno breaks into a fit, exclaiming that she can't return without him. He tries to reason with her, but Yuno won't listen. So he resorts to plan B, pushing her into the exit whether she likes it or not. Once inside the portal, she can't get out anymore, so Yuno is forced to have a tearful goodbye with Adapta. This pushes Yuno further into the deep end, asking Adapta, "What am I supposed to do without you?" Steadfast, he responds, "I want you to live. I want you to cry, rage, laugh, and just live. I know you can, and I want you to make your best efforts. Make an effort to live." These are the last things he tells her before he kisses her goodbye and the portal disappears. Fast forward, we get to see how the real world is doing after this commotion. Olympia was a failure, but Adapta's father and his team are determined to keep researching ways to help comatose patients. We also learn more from Adapta's father that the people who woke up from the coma sadly lost their memories of each other, meaning Yuno and Adapta don't remember each other anymore. Put a pin on this because I have many gripes with this plot point. After this, we get a montage of how our future diary owners are doing. Megami's back with her family, Yosuke is working minimum wage, Hagito meets with Rinko again, and Yuno's back to studying. All fine and dandy except for 3 people. Kibe, Haruna, and Arata. Kibe is back to work at Chronoseed, where he gives everyone a public conference apologizing for the cyber attacks, claiming that they were his fault. Excuse me, but what? Put another pin on this because I still can't wrap my head around this scene. As for Haruna, we see her asleep on a library table, presumably after a long evening of studying. We then see a mysterious figure put a jacket over her, and leave as she wakes up. The jacket is still on her, yet she has no idea where it came from. Finally, we see Arata in his hospital bed, still in a coma. A figure chimes into the room asking, "How much longer will you be asleep?" Arata's finger twitches, and we cut to a scene where Arata and Yuno walk by each other on the street. They bump shoulders, which makes Yuno's bouncy ball fall out of her purse. Arata picks it up, takes a long look at it, and runs back to Yuno, presumably to return it. As the screen fades to black, we hear Yuno's words. We finally meet. And so we end the show. Before getting into an overall analysis, I want to take a look at the ending, specifically of Kibe, Haruna, and Arata, because it left me with more questions than answers. So let's go point by point, starting with Kibe. My man, what do you mean the cyber attacks were your fault? It is true that Deus reached out to Kibe to create the future diaries and all, but that was within Olympia. In the real world, Deus was the one to blame for the cyber attacks. And let's remember Deus is a medical assistance program created by Arata's father and his team. So how does that tie back to Kibe? If anything, Kibe was a victim of Deus as well within the virtual reality. Shouldn't Arata's father be the one to blame? None of this is really explained, it's just a bomb they threw at you in the end. The best way I can find to justify it is, perhaps Olympia is tied to Chronoseed somehow. We know Arata's father was an employee of Chronoseed in the virtual reality, so this could also be true for the real world. If that's the case, then maybe he was the one in charge of developing the project for the company, and he decided to initiate the program earlier after their CEO fell into a coma, wanting him to recover as soon as possible. We know the starting of the program before completion was what sent Deus into a frenzy, so this might be why Kiba takes the blame. The program began too soon in an effort to save him, putting everyone else at risk. Still, even if this is true, letting Kiba take the blame is such a jerk move considering he was out like a light. The one taking responsibility should be the person who made the decision to start the program early, likely Arata's dad. Yet we don't see him going through any repercussions, which is very suspicious. Another possibility is that maybe Kiba is taking the blame since it's his company after all. Anyway, we can mull over this point as much as we want, but this inconsistency is likely a result of bad writing and nothing else. If they had taken the care to explain this just a little further, it wouldn't be so confusing. Now, for Haruna and Arata. The mysterious figure reaching out to them is actually Rui, as we can sort of see his face when talking to Arata. This leads to a lot of speculation, since let's remember that Rui is a program from Olympia. He doesn't exist. The easiest explanation for this is that the characters are hallucinating and recovering their memories from Olympia. But this doesn't explain the very real jacket that Haruna is left with, unless you deem that to be a hallucination as well. The other explanation is that Rui is real and somehow leaked out of Olympia, though there's nothing to really substantiate this theory besides Haruna's jacket. I do think it could be quite interesting though. Personally, I think the hallucination theory is the most likely, and Haruna's cutscene was purposely made to confuse viewers though. Lastly, let's talk about Arata. There are two questions we must ask. Did he really wake up, and did his final scene with Yuno actually happen? I'll admit, when I first watched the show, I took the last two scenes at face value. Arata's finger twitching, that must mean he woke up. So the last scene with Yuno is real. Right, guys? Right? Well, I guess that was wishful thinking on my end. Now that I'm older, I realized the ending was purposely made to be open-ended. You can interpret it two ways. Arata did wake up and met Yuno, or Arata didn't wake up at all and is dreaming of Yuno, possibly reliving some of his buried memories from Olympia. Yuno's last words of "we finally meet" could apply to either ending. In ending A, it's possible they recover their memories after meeting, and in ending B, Arata's recovering his memories through dreams. If you ask me personally, I think I'm more of an ending B person. I prefer the happy ending of the meeting again, but it just doesn't click for me. You mean to tell me his parents wouldn't have talked to him about Yuno? Neither did Kosaka? I didn't mention this earlier, but in the hospital room, Kosaka and Arata's parents talk about how he saved her. So, did no one mention anything to him? Besides, the whole scene has a very dreamy vibe to it. It just doesn't feel real. Let me know what you think of the ending and what interpretations you have for each character. I would love to hear it from someone else's perspective. Now, on to the last 3 points I want to tackle for this episode. Firstly, and this is more of a personal gripe, why couldn't Arata write up another diary for Yuno if he could create anything? For the angst, I know, but from a logical perspective, it feels like far too obvious of an answer. Just pisses me off. Next, Deus's nature. Deus tells us that she can't enact harm on her patients since she's a medical assistance program. This is fine and all if we ignore the fact that she actively tried killing both Arata and Yuno on multiple occasions. Not to mention the whole survival game thing. Maybe it's fine to do so within the program since it doesn't hurt them in real life. Well, that would go against her argument of Olympia being a perfect world where everyone is happy and singing kumbaya. Like, it's literally not. But hey, let's assume that harming people within Olympia is okay, as long as they aren't hurt in real life. Sure, then what's the deal with the cyber attacks? We know Deus is crashing out because her program wasn't completed. But what was the point of hacking the city's servers? Moreover, we are told that electricity, transport, gas, and water services were abruptly shut due to the cyber attacks. How does that not constitute harming people? Someone must have died from that. Look, I like the approach of Deus being an AI. It's fun, it's a cool trope, you can never go wrong with the evil AI takes over the world thing. But it's clear to me that the motivations and plots surrounding this program weren't well thought out. They were probably aiming for people to just go, program bad, program kill people, order, and move on. However, it wouldn't have taken much work to better explain these things, so I really wish they would have just tried, you know? And my last gripe with this episode, they lost their memories, oh no. Another very common trope, it adds to the angst, I get it. But it's such a deus ex machina for lack of a better word. We are told that the diary owners lost their memories of each other, as in, they lost their memories of the fire and what happened in Olympia. However, how does that work for release? They knew each other a year prior to this event. So did they lose a year's worth of memories too? How do you lose your memories of one person specifically without that affecting your overall memory? It's all too awfully convenient to the point that it just feels like a cheap way to end things. So I wish they would have gone a different direction with that. Or at least found a better explanation for Yuna's amnesia. Say she just lost a year's worth of memories and doesn't remember Adata or something. It's not as bad as the Deus thing, but it still bothers me a bit. Other analysis. There were a couple things I left out of the show's rundown, since I wanted to give them their own proper analysis. So let's get to that section. One of the plot points I found more bizarre was the initial storyline with Adata's dad. In the first episode, the dad mysteriously abandons the family and divorces the mom, much to everyone's confusion. We later find out he did this as a safety measure to protect Adata's mom. The father got a diary entry saying his wife would be killed, so to save her, he divorced her, meaning she wouldn't be his wife anymore, which nullified the entry. Look, I'm sorry, but this is the most convoluted way to go about the scenario. Besides, it happened in a matter of a day. You can't just divorce someone in a day. And even if he gave her the divorce papers and dipped, she's still your wife until the court says otherwise. To me, this feels like they were trying to implement the divorce of Yuki's parents somehow, as it originally played a big part into his motivations. But since another world turned Yuki's father into an actual loving father and husband, there wasn't much of an opening for him leaving his family, especially in the short run of the show. I feel like this plot point could have been easily fixed by tweaking the circumstances of the mother's death a little. Maybe the killer was actually after the father, but the mother died in the crossfire, so he left unannounced as a means to protect her. They never explained why or who was after the mom, so this could have been easily worked out. But I guess they really needed to add that divorce angle, which again is unnecessary considering how many changes were already done to fit the new narrative. Take for example Yuno, whose storyline was tweaked in a similar way, while maintaining a connection to both her original backstory and the new narrative of the show. In another world, her parents were still overly strict and borderline abusive with her, though perhaps not as much as in the anime, since instead of locking her in a cage to starve, they put her in a closet for a few hours. Definitely not Parents of the Year, but a little better, I suppose. Along with this change came the fact that Yuno didn't kill her parents in this version. Rather, they died in an accident. Despite this, Yuno still has a similar conflict of feeling empty without her parents. All the work she put into her studies, college, and future career was done to appease them, and now that there's no one left to impress, she is left uncertain as to how to continue her life. Cue and Narata who gave her a new purpose in life and blah blah blah. This is a change I like, because it alters the story in a way that favors a more realistic retelling. The whole plotline of Yuno living with her dead parents for over a year might work for a campy anime, but it wouldn't translate too well into a believable, real-life story. It also works with the softer version of Yuno they decided to create in another world. She's not really a murderer in this version, heck, none of the diary owners really are, except Takao's counterpart. They were regular people before the game started. And given how much action is packed into a single episode of Another World, keeping the original backstories for both Yuno and the side characters would have been too much. Which is exactly the reason I dislike the random divorce of Arata's parents. You win some, you lose some, I guess. Symbolism. In terms of costuming, I really love what they did with Yuna's character. They created a staple image for her that stays true to her personality and quirks, making her feel quite realistic. I'm a sucker for the small details, so I love seeing subtle choices for her character design. The bouncy ball she often plays with not only showcases some of the carefree and childish nature of her personality, but also hints of her past. Her nails are decorated with glittery stars, reminding us of her passion for the stars. She's often seen wearing quite girly clothes, with frilly collars, skirts, and flower motifs. In the pink, a lot of her wardrobe is pink and pastel. Even when dressed in a business suit to infiltrate the Cronus building in episode 4, she keeps her usual frilly socks and heels. Everything about her is sweet, cute, and on brand with Yuna's softer side. Haruna's style, on the other hand, is much darker and cold. Black and white t-shirts with big jackets, shorts, and long black socks. It denotes her more mysterious, closed-up side. Haito is a little more on the nose with his big casual jacket and cigarettes. Let's not forget he's the personification of the cool detective trope, so dude's chill as hell. Rui, in contrast, is always dressed more formally, often seen in dress shirts and his shoulder work bag. His style is more put together and classy than, say, someone like Arata, who, much like his carefree nature, is always wearing those loose tees, pants, and jackets. His hair is messy and so is his room, which, despite appearing in very few scenes, looks quite lived in. This is also a huge contrast to Yuno's empty beige mansion, and again, very indicative of their pasts. All this to say, I love the attention to detail. And also, speaking of symbolic details, I want to point out something about Yuno and Arata's passion for the stars. As much as this is a callback to the anime, they found a way to make it symbolic for the live action as well. Upon first meeting at the planetarium, Yuno and Arata bond over a little passage regarding the North Star, Polaris. This star is part of the Little Dipper, and is often regarded as a symbol of guidance, as it indicated to sailors where the North was. Arata and Yuno, both lost in terms of their future prospects, guided each other to find meaning in life, and in one of their later meetings, they look over a star called My Star, part of the Big Dipper. While this star holds different meanings depending on the culture, prosperity, tragedy, and marriage to name a few, astrology is often associated to catastrophic fires in losing your loved ones. Mind you, this was their last state before the fire that left them in a coma. I just have to say, whoever thought this up, I love you. Cast and interviews. I want to take some time to talk about the cast briefly, because there were some pretty interesting people who participated in this project. For starters, we have the lead actor, Masaki Okada, who has been in numerous manga movie adaptations, including but not limited to Space Brothers, A Gentle Breeze in the Village, Kyoko Kitegami's Memo, and the goofy adaptation of Gintama. Sorry, I still can't take that one seriously. He's also done several interviews regarding his work, including one about Future Diary, which you can find translated on my blog. There's a lot of interesting tidbits in there, but my favorite part is when he talks about respecting the work that is being adapted. You have to appease both the original author and the fans, so it must be difficult to play a character that's already so well loved. I try not to think too much about it. At first it did make me worry, but then I realized that there's a difference between what I can perform as an actual human and what can be drawn in the manga. I like to think of the series on its own. As long as it's fun to watch and the story and characters are well established, then it's all good. So you don't worry too much about sticking to the original work, and instead aim for the live action to be perfect as a live action. Exactly. I hope viewers will enjoy the manga as a manga and the drama as a drama. But of course, I can't forget to respect the original work. In fact, I think it's the most important thing. I'm most pleased with my work when it satisfies the original author. They also interviewed the original author, Sakai Yasuno, where he revealed that he wasn't involved in the production of the drama, yet he still enjoyed the direction that the story took. The drama version had a unique plot. What were your thoughts after watching it? It was certainly unique, but watching it I felt like it was a parallel story that reinterpreted the themes of the original. So it didn't make me uncomfortable. In fact, I enjoyed it. It was a very entertaining piece. I was involved in many aspects of the game and anime, from putting forward ideas to supervising the story, as well as the tone of the voice, or adding, deleting, and replacing sequences. On the other hand, I left the drama entirely up to the production staff, so it was fun to see the staff show me all sorts of things I wasn't involved in making. Moving on, we have Ayame Goriki, who played Yuno. She hasn't had as many movie appearances as Masaki, but she has participated in some pretty well-known adaptations such as Gatchaman and Black Butler. She also went on to make quite a bit of music around 2013 to 2015. Her most popular song is Tomodachi Yori Daiji na Hito, or You're More Than Just a Friend, for us English speakers. You may be familiar with the song if you listen to a lot of J-pop, and speaking of Hayame, she actually had a profile in the now-defunct Fuji TV blog. You see, Fuji TV used to have a microblog site, kind of like Twitter, called Imatsubu, where you could interact with staff from different shows and view the profiles of the characters from certain doramas. Yuna had her own profile on the site, where it said you could read the entries from her diary. Though unfortunately, due to limitations of the Wayback Machine, we can't really view her entries, just a description of her profile. Still, pretty cute detail. The biggest figure that appeared on the show was perhaps Kanata Hongo, who played Ryui. He's a popular actor in Japan who's been on a number of adaptations such as Gantz, Fullmetal Alchemist, Attack on Titan, Nana, and Goth, which, side note, I love Goth. I've only watched the movie and I want to read the novel that it was based on, but when I was seeing it for the first time and I saw his character on screen, I was like, he looks familiar. And it wasn't until later that I was like, oh my god, it's Ryui. Because his character in Goth is so cold and kind of psychotic, it completely took me out. Because Ryui's still like sweet and friendly, and then in Goth he's just like evil. Anyway, tangent over. He's also done a few voice acting gigs, most notably Danganronpa 3 as Ryota Mitarai. But overall, he's been in a lot of pretty good movies, especially suspense and mystery movies. So if you like Japanese cinema, I recommend you go through his IMDb, because he has some hidden gems in there. Goth, especially Goth. Also, he has a YouTube channel, I forgot to mention that. Cute videos, I really like the guy. And speaking of popular figures in the show, we have to talk about the one and only Kosaka Oji. He is played by Fumaki Kuchi, who is not only an actor, but also an idol. He was first in a group called B.I. Shadow back in 2008, and then in 2011, a group called Sexy Son. Now, if you watched the show, you might have seen Sexy Son mentioned in the credits, and if you're anything like me, you might have been like, what the fuck? Well, it's a boy group, and that's still around to this day, by the way. They're not called Timeless? Yeah, Timeless with a C. But they've been together for over 10 years, which in idol years is like a century. So that's crazy. But anyway, they're pretty popular, and they do typical Japanese pop music, which is very bright, very bubbly, lots of dancing, crazy backdrops. And there's one song that is just very funny to me. It's also called Sexy Zone, it's self-titled, but I don't know what it is about it, it just kills me. They're dancing around with these roses singing about sexiness, like, I don't know how to explain it, just watch it on your own, it's bizarre. Anyways, there was a lot of hype around Fumaki Kuchi being in the show, which is very funny considering Kosaka was such a minor character. They roped in all these fangirls to watch a show they probably could not give less of a shit about, to watch their favorite idol get 2 minutes of screen time. That is diabolical marketing. Both Fumaki Kuchi and Kanata Hongo probably had the biggest fanbase of the whole cast, which is most likely why they were chosen to do press for the show on Japanese morning TV. And how do I know this? Well, the fangirls, of course. There is no archived footage of them appearing on Japanese morning TV, but there are 2 bloggers that took pictures of the segment. One of them is called Fuma Fuma, and the other is called My Precious Kana. I'll let you guess who their faves are. It's kind of funny, the blogs are by 2 different people about 2 entirely different celebrities, yet they parallel each other so much, it's kinda creepy. I'm not complaining though, I appreciate the footage. Also, Masaki was on there too, but I don't think they cared. Justice for my guy. Anyway, according to one of the blogs, Kanata Hongo mentioned that the person he wanted to meet the most was Ishida Akira, who is the voice of Akise and many other popular anime characters. Funnily enough, Ishida was the narrator for The Interest of Another World, from episode 4 and onwards. I didn't notice this when I was first watching the show, but now that I know, I can't unhear it. It's a pretty neat detail. Alright, I won't extend myself much longer on this. I could go for a while talking about the cast and their filmography, their little fun facts, but I feel like this is a good spot to end this segment. As I mentioned earlier, I did make a blog post talking a little more in depth about Masaki Okada's interview. I also included other tidbits of cast interviews that were featured on the official Another World website, so check that out in the description if you're interested. Soundtrack review. If there's something that I must commend about this show, it's its incredible soundtrack. It's all available on YouTube, and I definitely recommend giving it a listen. The melodies all carry a very warm, nostalgic tone that greatly builds the mood for the show. In fact, it carries many of the scenes in action, especially in the more heart-wrenching moments, like Anata's confrontation with his father or his final goodbyes with Yuno. Some of my personal standouts are Electroversion, perhaps the most memorable and powerful and endearing track of the OST, Tsunoru Omoi, an incredibly sentimental and melancholic melody, Kizuna, which stands out for its stunning instrumentals and bittersweet tune, and Ballad Memory, a soft yet amusing track. Of course, I can't mention the OST without talking about the wonderful opening song, also titled Another World. It is performed by Koshi Basaki, and if I could describe it in one word, it would be dreamlike. There's something about the vocals, the instrumentals, and even the visuals that just feels mesmerizing, surreal, and calming altogether. They're simple but effective, and carry the nostalgic early 2010s feel to it. The lyrics themselves also evoke that feeling of haziness and dreaminess that is so present throughout the melody of the song, while also encapsulating many of the themes from the show. Overall, definitely a banger. Merchandising. There was a small amount of merch made in promotion for the show. More specifically, we have the Another World DVD Blu-ray set. The limited edition set included a special box and a 50-page booklet all about the show's background, which also had an interview with Esuno, by the way. Among other CDs was the show's theme song, which was sold individually as well. In terms of stationery and wearable merch, there was a small selection made available by Fuji TV, such as a clear folder, an iPhone 4 to 4S case that looks like the Cronus smartphones, a Deus keychain and phone jack charm, as well as a Cronus phone keychain. There was also a t-shirt design that was said to feature both the show's title and a graphic of Deus, available in white, pink, and gray, though sadly no photos exist of this product. Lastly, we have a set of limited edition postcards that feature original artwork of Esuno, with both Yuno and Yuki dressed as their live-action counterparts. Despite being limited edition, I'm not entirely sure how these were distributed, as the product itself says it wasn't for sale. My best guess is that they came in as a pre-order gift, but pretty cute anyway. More adaptations. What if I told you that Another World wasn't the only Future Diary live action? Well, it's technically the only complete adaptation we have, but it wasn't the only one in the works. You see, there were two much more obscure adaptations besides Another World. One that is unfortunately lost media, and the other which never materialized. Let's start with the one we know the most of. Future Diary's collaboration with Nissan Leaf. Yes, you heard that right. Nissan, as in the car company. For context, Nissan was the main sponsor for Another World. It's kinda hard to miss since they mention it at the beginning of every episode. So along with its sponsorship, Nissan also created a mini-series of commercials to promote its electric car, the Nissan Leaf. This mini-series was in collaboration with Future Diary Another World, featuring original artwork of Yuno and Yuki dressed as the drama leads in the title card. And a fun fact, this is the same artwork that was featured in those postcards I mentioned earlier. Aside from this, there isn't much relation to the drama or the anime in these commercials, as no one from the cast of Another World was featured in the collab. Now, information about this miniseries is incredibly scarce, but the little information we do have comes from the Japanese wiki of Another World. According to the site, the series was originally posted on YouTube, as I can't find evidence of it airing anywhere else, between May and June of 2012. The series had a total of 9 episodes, all of which were around a minute and a half, and most of which are lost media, by the way, but we'll get into that later. We only have the synopsis of the first 2 episodes and the titles of the rest. Episode 1, titled Diet Diary, was about a college student named Mai Asakawa, who was keeping track of her diet on her phone, until the phone eventually turned into a future diary. Episode 2, titled CO2 Diet Diary, is about another college student named Kobayashi Sho, who is interested in protecting the environment thanks to the influence of her father. The gist of the episode is that her phone also turns into a future diary. The rest of the episodes are titled Professor, Drive, Returning Home, Okimama Arrives, which is a weird translation, Super Bowl, Leave to Home, and Finale. As I said earlier, most of these episodes are lost media, since Nissan privated all of their YouTube videos related to the miniseries. However, after a lot of digging, I managed to recover the first episode from the Internet Archive. You can find it re-uploaded and subtitled to English in the link down below. There's not much else to say about this miniseries other than it being a pretty strange collab. I don't know whose idea in the marketing team it was to promote an electric car using diaries that predict the future, but I'm not complaining. It's original. Moving along, we have the final live-action adaptation of Future Diary, which consisted of a Chinese movie adaptation. Yes, an entire freaking movie. In April of 2017, Chinese media giant Starlight Media announced in a press conference that they were working in the production of 3 live-action movie adaptations, namely of the classic video game series Contra, but also of Sakai Suno's most popular works, those being Future Diary and Big Order. However, none of these projects were followed up on since their announcement. According to the original press conference, scripts for both the Contra and Future Diary adaptations were completed, adding that the Future Diary movie was set to be filmed in 2018. Now, it's been over 8 years at this point, and with no new announcements for any of these projects, it's safe to say that they most likely will never be released. In fact, it's hard to say whether production progressed past the script and into the filming of any of these movies, but I'm betting my money that it likely never even got to that stage. The only evidence we have of these adaptations' intended existence is a rough outline of the script and a concept poster. The outline reads as follows. A being of power implants a future diary into the mobile phone of the orphan student Wang Shui. I hope I'm pronouncing that one right. This diary records what will happen in the future, including the contents of his test at school, dangerous evil encounter, etc. If the diary is destroyed, however, the owner will also disappear with the diary. There are others with similar diaries. All find themselves forced to battle to the last. From this, we can gather 2 key pieces of information about this movie. One, that Yukiteru's Chinese counterpart would be called Wang Shui, and that both his parents were dead from the get-go. There's also no mention of Yuno, interestingly enough, though we do see what looks to be Yuno and Yuki together in the concept poster. Other than that, everything seems to be roughly the same as in the anime, though it's hard to tell with such little information. Mind you, information is also incredibly scarce about any of these projects. The few news sites that reported on this are sketchy, ad-ridden hellholes that would probably give you a virus or 2 if you look at them too hard. The main source I got this from was actually a Tumblr user who compiled everything we knew so far into one post, and managed to pull the synopsis from public Chinese government records about upcoming films. Wow. Other than that, there's not much else to say about these clearly doomed adaptations. It's a pity we never saw any of this come to fruition, as it does seem like it had some potential. Final thoughts. While I wouldn't go out of my way to call this show a masterpiece, it is certainly up there when it comes to its genre. As much as I may criticize the acting or dialogue at certain points, there's no denying that the choice to create a new plot did wonders for this show. It is a fresh concept derived from a beloved story that doesn't attempt to detract or add on its principles, rather be an entity of its own. It provides something for fans of the original story and for those who aren't familiar with it yet. And for that level of versatility and creativity that is often missing in the reboot and adaptation camps, I must commend the creators of the show. They took a risk, and it paid off in the form of a memorable and heartwarming story that I still fondly look back to. Sure, I have my bias of being a big Future Diary fan, but Another World charmed me in its own right. With its relatable characters, endearing backstories, and captivating mysteries, it's hard not to get attached to the action. Once the ball starts rolling and the plot twists get revealed, you're on the edge of your seat waiting for more. Honestly, I wish more live actions and adaptations would take the route of adapting the material they're working on instead of just copy and pasting. Creativity seems to slowly be dying more and more in this day and age, but shows like Another World remind me that not all is lost. So, despite not being the perfect show, I would still highly recommend it to any Future Diary fans or drama watchers alike. It's a short little series with lots of action packed into every episode. It's fun, a little silly at times, but has plenty of tender moments that make it worth a watch. So if you haven't already, definitely check it out. And that marks the end of the video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had as much fun watching this as I had fun making it. And again, definitely check out the show if you can. Goodbye!